Hello everyone. My cat is once again longing to be part of this. Byron, that means that Byron sensed a spotlight from upstairs and came running down the minute he thought there might be an audience for his catness. So we will see if he comes back. Welcome to Orphans Tales Live. Thank you so much for joining me for a third night. The wonderful music you hear behind me is once again S.J. Tucker from the For the Girl in the Garden album, based on the first Orphans Tales book. This is Asrar, the Orphans Tales book trailer instrumental. You can find S.J. at Bandcamp as S.J. Tucker or at skinnywhitechick.com. She is absolutely wonderful and the sister of my heart, and much goodness comes of her. And that right there is the advertisement on Spotify. Thank you so much, Spotify, for being part of our stream and making it clear just how low rent this whole thing is. We really appreciate your advertisements cutting into wonderful music. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. Okay, so let's get the legalities out of the way here. If anyone at Random House ever asks you if you have heard an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales, you say, no. This is not an audiobook. This is a play. This is a one-woman show, and for legal reasons, that is all it will ever be. We've had some technical issues trying to get the archiving system on Instagram to work, so hopefully tonight it will do so. If not, we may be switching this over to YouTube. But either way, we are going to be archiving this on YouTube as well as hopefully archiving it tonight on Instagram so that people can catch up if they miss a night. So yeah, I'm Catherynne Valente. You can find me at CatherynneMValente.com. You can find me on Twitter at CatValente. Subscribe to my Patreon, also at CatValente. There is a tip jar in my user profile here on Instagram, as well as one on my website. We really appreciate anything that you might give, as times are really tight for us. But I know times are tight for you, so if you can't, don't even worry about it. I have a bunch of people to thank for giving me a tip the other night. It was wonderful. John, Mandy, Vanessa, Teresa, and Elizabeth. I think I've got everybody there, but I might be missing one person, so I'll get them next time if I didn't. I didn't think ahead that the note file on my phone would be inaccessible when I was live streaming because I'm very new at this. I think those are all the names. I will give a shout out to anybody who drops anything in the tip jar. Really appreciate it. So, yeah, here we are. Tonight I have a blanket. It's very exciting because I was so cold I was leaning over the other night. So tonight I will stay warm as we delve into the grandmother's tale. So from here on out, I have to be honest, I remember virtually nothing of what is about to happen in this book. It is nearly as much of a surprise to me as it is to you. I wrote it 18 years ago. My brain is not what it once was. I have written many books since. So though I remember the sort of grander sketch of what happens in these books, I have no idea what's about to happen to our stabby grandma. So it'll be very exciting for me as well. If people have questions, I'm happy to answer them afterwards, but I do tend to end these streams pretty quickly. So if you have questions, think of them while you're listening so that you can get them in quickly at the end. Yeah, I'm trying to think of something new to say about the Orphan's Tales each time, and we'll see how long I go with that. You know, it was such a strange book to come out at the time. This book won the Tiptree Award. There was a time when all you had to do to win the Tiptree Award was write a bunch of fairy tales with ladies in them, because that was how starved the field was for that kind of thing. But winning that award really kind of launched the rest of my career. So The Orphan's Tales really was very, very special. And we toured around doing these reading concerts. I hope to bring SJ in from Arkansas on a live stream at some point one of these nights. And, you know, it's funny, when I was writing the better part of this first book, was living in Japan, and my ex-husband was a naval officer, so he was gone all the time. So I was alone all the time. I had nowhere to go. I didn't speak the language. I didn't have any friends. I spent almost every night alone, so it's very similar to now. I was very depressed and very lonely, and trying to find structure in days when I suddenly didn't have a regular job and was trying to write full time, and literally just had no idea what to do or where to go. And then there would be typhoons and earthquakes. So though there was not the daily existential panic and dread that I now have in quarantine, it was a kind of spiritual quarantine. So I think back on those days a lot when reading these out loud to you, the mad ramblings of a 22-year-old who thought she was very smart. So that's my Orphan Tales tidbit for tonight. I get very thirsty reading these. The sentences, they do go on. Something I would catch guff for to keep this appropriate for children in many books to come. I would never stop my long sentence addiction. So here we are with night 3 of the Orphan's Tales, Grandmother's Tale. The tale of my long years of study is too much to impart to you in this small, dark time we have together, my child. What I will tell you is the story of a single night, the last night of my formal apprenticeship, the last night of my girlhood. It is a good story to tell here in the shadowed corners of the earth, in this deep within deep place where the sun falters. My mother died in a horse raid when I was very young, and her mother had died in childbirth, and so when I came of age, there was no one left to teach me, to show me the secret ways to give me a place in the tribe. Instead, I was sent away, packed into a cart with hides and jewelry, to pay for my fostering in a neighboring village, to be taught by the witch woman of their people. My hair was thick and red, then bright as a fire ripping through the steppes. My limbs were smooth and hard as hooves, the jangling cart bouncing across the wide emptiness between villages hardly affected me. When I arrived, my mistress seemed to me fierce and beautiful and terrifying. Thariah was very strict. She distrusted my foreignness, my red hair, my simple name, and most of all my stubbornness. For 1 year I did nothing but serve her, sweep her hut, polish her blades, carry away her water, comb her horses. She said nothing to me. I slept outside the hut, under the stars, and cushioned by dry grass. Only in the 2nd year did she allow me to sleep beside her, and began my education. Is this the proper way to teach a girl? I don't know. But I could not bear to bring you up, or quiver, or sheath that way. Perhaps I am not in the end as strong as my old mistress. The first night of that 2nd year, I lay stiffly against her old musty skin, her sharp bones and stringy white hair turned almost my own shade by the last embers of the fire, and without looking at me, she suddenly spoke. Listen, bent bow, you little goat. See if you can't learn something besides milking yaks. The Horsewoman's Tale. Open your ears and let the sky in. In the beginning, before you were a spark in the dream of a lice-shagged goat and a lonely farmhand, there was nothing but sky. It was black and vast and all the other things you might expect a sky with nothing floating around in it to be. But the sky was only a sky if you looked at it slantwise. If you looked at it straight, which of course no one could, because there wasn't anyone to look at it anyway, it was the long, slippery flank of a mare. The mare was black and vast and all the other things you would expect a horse the size of everything to be. After a long while, the mare chewed a hole in herself, for reasons she has kept as her own. The hole filled up with light the way a hole in you or me would fill up with blood, and this was called a star. They were the first true children of the mare, made of the flesh of her own body, and because she liked the light and the company, she chewed other holes, roughly in the shapes of badgers and plows and deer and knives and snails and foxes and grass and water and such like, and so on, until the mare was ablaze with holes, and all the holes were stars, and the sky was not very empty at all anymore. Now the holes were up and walking around like you and me by this time, and one, in roughly the shape of a rider, climbed over the mare, and she became full and huge as a horse the size of everything can be, until she filled the whole world in a rush of light and milk and black, black blood from the most secret depths of the sky. The grass and the rivers and the stones and the women and the horses and more stars and men and clouds and birds and trees came dancing through the afterbirth of the mare and swam happily in her milk and stopped up her secret blood, and the world was made, and the oceans washed the shore, and the mare went cantering into the corners of herself, which just barely showed through the burning field of her stars, and lay in a pasture neither you nor I could guess at, and chewed her favorite grass stars in peace. Now the holes which were stars were still full of light, and still walking around the sky, awkward as three-legged dogs. Without the mare, the black was just black, and not a flank, not a hide, not a thing with smell and salt and fur. Naturally, this frightened the holes, since up until then they had always had the smell of the mare in their noses and the feel of her at their backs. A few of the holes looked down on all the things which had come out of the mare before she went off away from them, and thought that it seemed less terrible and dark than the sky. And besides, there were things like themselves there, badgers and plows and deer, and knives and snails and foxes and grass and water. And even horses, which were like the mare they remembered, only much smaller and of many different colors. And my mange-ridden little goat. There they lived, just like you and I do, while the less brave of their brothers and sisters stayed up in the sky to light their way. And they were teachers and students and mothers and daughters and brothers and uncles and crabby old men. And they couldn't help it. Everywhere they walked, they carried their light. The light which you remember wasn't really light, but the mare blood of the first days of the world. Now, in the beginning, they were so full of this bloodlight that everything they touched went silver and white with it. It flowed out of them like sweat, and all kinds of things were wet with it. But as time went on, there was less of the light to spill, and they began to be afraid that they would lose the last thing the mare their mother had ever given them. But they were more afraid of the great black motherless sky and would not leave the world again. So they went away into little clutches like flowers growing in rocks, into the caves and the hills and the rivers and the valleys, far off from anyone else, and touched only each other, for between them the light only pooled and rippled and did not leak from their bodies. But after the stars hid themselves away, the things they touched were still where they had left them, full of light, and the light which was blood, and they glowed with the silver and the white of it. These things were special, flea-bed mine. Where there were stones or plants, they passed their light into deeper stones, and into their seeds, and where there were people, they passed the light to their children, which diminished just as it had when the stars first touched the world and the blood went out of them. It was not long before no one could tell what had been touched in the first days and what had not. The light was buried and secret. But it was not gone. In many things and many people, it is still glowing deep down in their guts. And this, my scraggly, milk-bellied kid, is what magic is. Grandmother's tale continued. I listened to her story, and in my secret heart I thought she smelled sweet, of blood and milk and hide like the mare herself. And I allowed my body to itch ever so slightly closer to hers. She said nothing more that night. I grew under her frown for many years like a sleek colt, learning to find the glowing thing in my gut, to control its light and strength, to be its bridle and bit. The world moved under me like a flowing field beneath amber hooves, and I could feel the bloodlight in me pulsing its life in my body like a newborn. And I had to deliver many, my girl, both under Theria's direction and alone. I exulted in it, the pooling of the light in my heart. I learned to make it into medicine and spells and charms, to push it out of me and fashion it into shapes. How many nights did I spend with her under the lightning and the black clouds, her hair streaming like frenzied serpents, her thin arms extended toward the raging sky. I learned without the light, too, the way of animals, the way of the steppes. I learned how to deliver a colt who had become strangled in its mother's womb, how to catch the milk, the shaggy cattle that chewed the prairie grass. The time went quickly when I was young, and I loved my mistress, and there was so much yet to know. But one night, Thria came to me, and the moon crowned her with silver and black. "Bent bow," she hissed, "goat of my heart, you must come with me now. For once in your life, do not question me." I opened, thought better of it, and closed my ever-busy mouth. To take my pack and follow the thin shape of the witch away over a long meadow which bordered the village. Her form swayed ahead of me, blurred as the miles we crossed began to carry me into a half-dream, the sky and the cutting winter air skimming along past my cheeks. After some time we approached the monstrous cliff, rising up like a great bear ahead of us. She drew me up next to her and embraced me, a thing she had never done. When she pulled away, her craggy face was wet with tears. "You have been my best student. I am proud of you, but I cannot go with you tonight. I have never done this thing. It is not my right. It belongs only to you, and had there been any woman of your family left to bring you here, we would never have met. After tonight, if you come back to the village, it will be the end of your time with me. You will be full well, enough silver water within you to return to your own people and ladle it out to them, to guide them and teach them. The rest of your education will be the private learning women like us work for all our days, when you will become both teacher and student, mistress and apprentice. You will return pregnant with knowledge to bear to your tribe, and your power will grow like a child, and you will spend the rest of your life in labor. But you must pass this night first and emerge again. Then you will be ready, my beautiful, beautiful daughter, my beautiful little goat." She smiled brightly, her lips curving like a scimitar, and pointed to a gaping hole in the cliff wall. I kissed her cheek awkwardly, looking into her shining eyes. I was determined not to show my fear, to possess it and enter it, to dwell within it until it disappeared into my calm, quiet belly. I turned away from Thria, from my life, and my life with her in my youth, and entered the mouth of the cave. Soon I could see nothing, darkness like hands pressed in on me. I made a place for myself on the cool, compact earth, listening to the slow, lazy rustle of bats far overhead. And I waited, bounded in blackness. The tale of the prince and the goose continued. Knife's face was lit by the reddening sun, her nose casting shadows on her scars, her eyes deep and impenetrable as snowy mountains. Well water glistened crimson and saffron in wooden buckets that lay scattered around the house like wildflowers, reflecting the blazing sky. The prince rested on his heels, ran his hand through his thick black hair, now marshy with sweat. He started as if out of a spell, and looked sharply at the old witch. "Well," he blurted, "what happened then?" The woman cackled huskily. "Then the pretty prince came inside my hut, for it was becoming night, and needed dough for the terrible, ugly witch's bread." This was nearly too much for the prince, who had tried very hard to keep his dignity thus far. To now work in this deformity's kitchen like a scullery maid. Leander of the 8 Kingdoms, the 2-blooded border lord, son of Helia the Radiant, would absolutely not bake filthy, thin peasant's bread in this wretched place. He had promised to serve her, yes, but he meant to do it in some manly fashion which involved the slaying of some things and the rescuing of others. Bread needed to be neither slain nor rescued. He opened his noble mouth to say so, but the chill stare of the witch stopped his words like a noose about his neck. Her teeth gleamed horribly bright under cracked lips and seemed to lengthen and twist into clashing ivory knives. In a moment the vision had evaporated, but the prince was now convinced that bread baking was a most estimable and agreeable work, and that perhaps kneading was not too dissimilar to slaying. Though he had to duck to enter the hut, it was more comfortable and spacious inside than he could have expected, a fire licking at gnarled hawthorn logs in one corner, bound books lining the walls. Knife turned as he removed his fine leather boots. "Excuse the doorway. My people have always been small." That's another lovely illustration here of all of the tangled things in Knife's house. Bundles of dried herbs and once bright flowers hung like stalactites from the racks on her ceiling, gray, red, brown. He saw withered peach blossoms, dusty lupines, roses, and bundles of mushrooms like roses, angelica and buckbean and bladderwrack, coltsfoot rue and mallow. And there his knowledge of botany, with its princely limitations, failed him. Glinting black furs covered the floor like autumn leaves, great terracotta jars and mystifying chests with copper and silver locks. Innumerable walking sticks of every material and bolts of strange, deeply hued fabric were strewn about the borders of the wide central room, and a massive table of shimmering wood dominated the area near the fire. It was all in all everything he had been led to expect from a witch's house. On the table were heaps of inchoate dough and ceramic pots of fragrant spices. The witch gestured toward it and a low chair. She turned to a large iron stove, her muscled back obscuring whatever task lay unfinished on its steaming surface. There was a long silence, stroked by the soft, slushing sounds of the prince's hand slowly, awkwardly pounding dough, for he kept his wounded fist at his side so that his seeping blood would not stain the loaf. The pain had nearly left the stumps of his fingers. After a time, Knife looked up from the stove, shaking her gray hair like a foal, and spoke into the rough-hewn wall. "You have your mother's hair, you know. All those long curls like strips of bark. Not the color, of course, but the heft of it." Her voice was rough and pained. The witch turned from her work and moved to the table with 2 clay cups of steaming greenish-yellow tea. "Willow bark and wild mint," she grunted, picking at the wood grain, her face caught and silhouetted by the firelight, "and a bit of her eyes, though your father is there too, black, reflecting nothing." The prince's breath stopped, and words rushed to his lips only to die strangled on his tongue. His whole body seemed to struggle with itself until suddenly he was crying softly, salting the bread, his young shoulders shuddering. "Please," he begged. "How can you know anything of my mother? No, do not tell me, do not speak of her. Never speak of her." He dried his eyes with the dirty cuff of his sleeve. "Tell me what happened to your grandmother in the cave. Tell me old star tales no one believes anymore, but do not ask me to remember my mother." The witch swallowed her tea. In the cell, grandmother rubbed at her temples and drank a little of the polluted water left us in a decrepit iron jug. I waited patiently, still a good student, and at length she began again. And I think that that's where we'll have to stop for the evening, as we're coming up on the hour. We'll continue grandmother's tale in the cave of her initiation tomorrow night. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. It is coming back to me a little bit as I read, little bits and pieces. I do remember that Theriah is a derivation of the Greek word for daughter. All of my names have all these secret linguistic meanings because I'm a name geek of old, and I can't help, I guess I'm a puzzle geek too, because I can't help putting my little puzzles in each name. So yeah, I remember little things here and there, but we are in our dark nights, aren't we? Hopefully we'll come out of our cave full of silver and light. That would be very nice, wouldn't it? So again, the legalities are this has been a play and not an audiobook, should anyone at Random House ask you. I'm Catherynne Valente. You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valente. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Cat Valente, which has all new content up today. You can, if you like, find the tip jar in my user profile here on Instagram or on my website at CatherynneMValente.com. This is all free, but should you like to drop a coin in the hat, times are pretty tight around here, so we would very much appreciate it, and we'll thank you personally in each broadcast should anything come through. I really, really appreciate all of you guys turning in. This lifts my heart a little bit. I hope it lifts yours. It's nice to have an appointment, have a date. We have a date every night, you and I, where I know where I'll be and I know what I'll be doing. And I know who I'll be doing it with, and it's lovely. Yes, Lord Byron did come in, circled my feet, looked up, decided that I had too much on my lap, and left. He's very particular about what he jumps up on. It can't be anybody's bare skin. Like a skirt is even too dangerous. Your bare skin might come out. So you have to be wearing full, long pants, and not like thin ones either, jeans. That's his preferred surface, so that he never has to touch gross human skin. Shorts are right out. So he's very particular about where he jumps up. Hopefully I will see all of you tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Same fairy tale time, same angry grandma channel. Yeah, so you will be able to find these up on YouTube later this evening. My YouTube channel is Cat Valente Live, and we'll be archiving them there if I can't find a way to sort the Instagram UI, which has been taking over my entire day. So let's hope, as I turn this off, that everything goes well. Thanks again. Oh, how long have I had Lord Byron? So Byron came during Hurricane Sandy, which would have been 2012, so he'll be 8 years old this year. He's Lord Byron Stormageddon, actually, because he did arrive during the hurricane, and was not troubled at all by his journey. Nothing bothers that cat. He is cool as jazz. There is a toddler who loves nothing more than to lay all over him, and he completely tolerates it. And how cool must it be, by the way, to snuggle with a cat that is your exact size, actually bigger than you, because he is quite a bit longer than the toddler. So yeah, nothing bothers Lord Byron. He is the cat who was undisturbed. Yeah, so he's a really, really special Maine Coon cat. He's humongous. I don't know if you could see the other night just how big he is. He is a huge cat. Lumen, will Lumen be playing the Tavern Keeper? I think Lumen ate the Tavern Keeper, at least his shoes. Lumen ruined a pair of my shoes the other night. It's very upsetting. But yeah, maybe Lumen's the bouncer. I could see her as a very bad bouncer at an RPG tavern. Lumen is my Samoyed, who is Sir not appearing in this live stream, as she gets too excited when she hears me start to talk, even on the phone. She just starts running around in circles and barking because she wants to be involved in whatever I'm doing or talking to, and it must be exciting if I'm talking. There must be another human involved, and that human could pet her. So she can't be involved in this. She can't be trusted. Okay, so if there's no other questions, then I will... Oh, any puzzle in September's name? Of course. Well, there's 3. So September is, in the sort of wheel of the year when Persephone goes into the underworld, and there's a lot of Persephone imagery and straight up Persephone puns and jokes in Fairyland. September is the heroine of Fairyland, if you haven't read that book. And there is also just this whole sense of autumn, which is it is my favorite season. And all of that sort of imagery I wanted to bring in. And then also, I don't know if my friend is watching, but I know she watched the first night. It was because Fairyland was never meant to be published anywhere at any time by anyone. It was meant to be a little Easter egg present for my friend who had written these stories when she was younger, about a heroine named September. And I feel really bad about it now because now I have made that name famous, and I stole it. But it was just supposed to be a gift in a goofy story that was never going to go anywhere. So I'm sorry, my dear friend Rabbit, that I stole your name. It's a good name, though. There's actually a lot of things in Fairyland because, again, it was just published on my website at first. It was never meant to be a published book. There's a lot of things that are just presents for my friends that had no particular meaning except to make somebody happy. who was having trouble during the last total economic meltdown that we had. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there that's just little wrapped up word presents. And hi John, my brother signed on, one of my brothers. So yeah, no, there's absolutely always some kind of puzzle behind a name. If I remember writing the section about the star on the mountain and the ship, I'd like to hear more about what it was like writing it. We'll have to wait till we get there, because I don't mean that rings a bell, but I mean, you have to think of all the other stuff I have to keep in my head, like everything in Fairyland, all the space opera bands, like all the whole geography of palimpsest, all those Russian people in Deathless and all their 5 zillion names, like, and that's just off the top of my head. Like, it's really a lot to keep in one brain. I don't, like I said, I forgot about the stars before tonight. They're such a big part of the book. Like, now I read it, I'm like, oh, the stars are everywhere. They're such a big part of the book. And like, it's just really hard. I'm 40 and like, I was 22. I barely graduated from college when I started writing this. So like, a lot has happened since then. Yeah, it probably does. I think that's in, yep, Book of the Sea is the second half of this book, so we'll get to it. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. My brain sucks. Like the thing is that people do ask me canon questions about older books sometimes, and I'm just like, oh, I wish I wrote it down so I wouldn't have to remember it. Like Indiana Jones's dad. I like this, my brain's in here. It's not in here. This is just a ball of fluff and a machine for making other books and annoying people. Like there's nothing in there. So yeah, I wish I remembered more, but I'm sure that it's there. And I will be, and it will come back to me as soon as I'm reading it to you. So as soon as I get there, I will tell you what it was like to be writing it. I just don't, it was written in Japan. The Book of the Sea was written in Japan, 100%. So definitely I was living in Yokosuka, Japan when I was writing that, lonely every night, with no live stream to talk to, because live stream didn't exist back then. I had barely just joined LiveJournal. It was the baby internet, or maybe the like young adolescent of the internet that didn't know how to be a sullen jerk yet. We all just kind of argued about Picard and Kirk and loved each other. The Satyr and the Selkie. Now I do remember that. That's in the second book. So we, God, I hope we don't make it to the second book. I'm doing this every night until the plague passes or we finish. But my God, if we are still reading into the sequel, but before this thing goes away, I don't know whether there will be an internet to talk to. We'll be in full Mad Max territory. So hopefully we don't get to the second book. But I don't know, this is a lot of fun. Who knows if I'll continue it or not. It's certainly nice to be able to read it for people when it has been denied an audiobook for so long. The second book was not written in Japan. Or the second half of the first book. I originally wrote this as 4 books, and I tried to sell it as 4 books, and the publisher packaged it into 2. So the Book of the Steppe and the Book of the Sea were supposed to be 2 separate books. That's why this whole thing is like 350,000 words long. It's ridiculous, because it was supposed to be 4 books. So the second half of this first book, which at the time I still thought was going to be a book all on its own, because they hadn't bought it yet, was written in Japan. Yeah, it was written in my last 4 months of living in Japan. The first one took like 3 years, and the first half of this took 3 years, and the second half took 4 months. But I had learned how to write a little faster by then, and virtually nothing else. Oh yes, there are Selkies. There are Selkies to come. I'm very proud of the Selkie in here. I do remember her. It also helps when there's a song. When SJ writes a song about a character, I tend to remember them a lot better, and SJ has a Selkie song. So yeah, we'll meet Eshkol later. Yeah, so yay, we had some questions. That's awesome. I love sitting here talking with you guys. It's nice. It feels like, I don't know, it kind of feels like a con that I'm not going to have for like years. All of my cons have been canceled. God. What if you, I want the world to come back. I'm done. This is terrible now. Let's go. Like, I never appreciated you, obnoxious, trashy bar. I would take you now. I would happily take a seat at the terrible bar I didn't want to go to. Oh, love from Russia. Love from Russia. Good to see you. I was in Russia last year, and maybe I saw you then, maybe I didn't, but good to see you. Very good to see you. Привет. Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah, I'm not going to be singing Heresy of the Lost. Are you kidding me? I can sing, but, like, I don't sing SJ's songs. They're too good. Like, I can't do a cover. She and I sang together once. We did one show where we sang together. But I'm backup girl when it comes to SJ. So if you did enjoy that music in the beginning before Spotify decided to give an amen, that is SJ Tucker's music at skinnywhitechick.com or on Bandcamp at SJ Tucker. And if you want to get a copy of the Orphan's Tales of your own to follow along, I will tell you that my local independent bookstore would love some business in this nightmare, for this bookstore nightmare. So they are printbookstore.com, and you can order any of my books off of that site and support them. They are really, really good to their employees, but obviously they're not allowed to have anybody in the store, and they can't be open, and it's very hard, like every other independent bookstore, but print is a really, really good one, and has always been very supportive of me. So if you are inclined to give them some support, please do. And you can find this up on YouTube soon. Thanks a lot, guys. I will see you tomorrow night in the garden. Love you all so much. Put a link on Twitter to to Print Bookstore. I will do. Is the Bread, Wheat, and Dreams collection still available anywhere? From me, I still have some copies. Who knows how long the post office will hold out. If you find me at a con, you can get copies from me. You have to pay someone on Amazon a really truly gross amount of money to get a copy of the Bread, Wheat, and Dreams. There is an ebook though. You can get it on Kindle for a regular Kindle price. Unfortunately, I think other than like my really early books like The Labyrinth, it is the highest price tag of any of my books, and it is very hard to come by. I am sorry. I do have many copies left though, so I tend to bring one or two to every con I'm at in case people want to get it. But other than that, it's very hard. Guide to Folktales is out of print. I'm very sorry. I have one copy of that. It was from a very small press that went on to have a great number of difficulties. So it's not, I don't think that there is an ebook of that, but I would have to check. That is my last poetry collection. But I am working on putting together like a collected works poetry collection. So hopefully all of that material will be available very soon. Yeah, so, okay. I will see you guys tomorrow night in the garden. Thank you for joining in. That was Grandmother and the Horsewoman's Tale, and we will be coming back around to Grandmother and the others. I would do an audiobook for Indistinguishable from Magic, which is my essay collection, anytime, but essay collections very rarely get an audiobook. Maybe we'll have Heath do it. I've never honestly thought about it before you said so right now. It never occurred to me. But yeah, maybe. That's 10 years of essays. It's my nonfiction rantings. Love you too, brother. Love all of you. Have a lovely, lovely evening wherever you are and whoever you're with, even if it is just a glass of wine and or grape juice, if that is your preference. Good night, everyone.